8 Essential Facts About J. Robert Oppenheimer. Source: Mental Floss. By visualgk.com. Julius Robert Oppenheimer is best known as the physicist who helped to build the first atomic bomb. But rocks were his first love. He directed the laboratory that built and successfully tested the first atomic bomb. Then, once it became possible for mankind to build an even more dangerous weapon, he became an outspoken critic of the nuclear arms race, and was put on trial by the very government he once served. Here are 8 essential facts about Julius Robert Oppenheimer. 12 years old Oppenheimer was invited to give a lecture on geology. Oppenheimer majored in chemistry as a Harvard undergrad, and later made a name for himself as a physicist, but rocks and minerals were his first scientific love. Born in New York City, on April 22, 1902, he used to collect rock samples in Manhattan and the Hudson River Palisades. By the age of 12, he was using the family typewriter to correspond with well-known geologists about the rock formations. Not aware of his youth, one of these correspondents nominated Robert for membership in the New York Mineralogical Club. And soon thereafter, a letter arrived, inviting him to deliver a lecture before the club. Young Oppenheimer gave the speech, and got a round of applause for his efforts, though he needed to stand on a box in order to see over the podium. Oppenheimer helped family members escape Nazi Germany. Oppenheimer hailed from a non-observant German Jewish family. In 1937, he used his own money to sponsor his Aunt Hedwig and her son Alfred, plus Alfred's family, when they fled their home to come stateside, after Hitler rose to power. Father of the atomic bomb. The physicist was just 38 years old, in 1943, when General Leslie R. Groves chose him to direct the Los Alamos National Laboratory, LANL, in New Mexico. He was an unlikely candidate for the job. Yes, Oppenheimer had already received his Ph.D., and was teaching at the University of California, Berkeley. But, the thin, chain-smoking Oppenheimer was eccentric by his own admission, had relatively little administrative experience, and had not won a Nobel Prize. Also, he had relatives who were suspected of being communist sympathizers. The Los Alamos team's core objective was the top-secret Manhattan Project, a secret campaign to invent the first nuclear weapons. Oppenheimer managed everything, from the salaries to the living quarters at the LANL, and had a real talent for settling disagreements that flared up between scientists and military personnel connected to the Manhattan Project. It was at this New Mexico lab that Oppenheimer earned the nickname, Father of the Atomic Bomb. His mind turned to the Bhagavad Gita as he watched the first nuclear bomb explode. Oppenheimer couldn't help but think of the Bhagavad Gita. On July 16, 1945, the day of the infamous Trinity nuclear test. At 5:29 am, the LANL staff made history by becoming the first people to successfully detonate an atomic bomb. Oppenheimer famously quoted the Bhagavad Gita in a 1965 TV documentary, when he reflected on the test and how it made him feel. It's arguably the best-known comment he ever made. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form, and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all felt that, one way or another. After World War II, Oppenheimer became an opponent of the hydrogen bomb. In 1949, the Soviet Union tested a nuclear bomb of their own. Not wanting to lose ground in the arms race, President Harry S. Truman signed off on the development of an experimental new weapon, the hydrogen bomb. Oppenheimer was very much against it. Since 1946, he had been involved with the General Advisory Committee, GAC, to the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. Following that Soviet nuclear test, Oppenheimer led a GAC discussion panel about the ethics and feasibility of H-bomb research. The committee concluded that it shouldn't be built, because this was a weapon of genocide that had absolutely no military necessity. Nevertheless, the U.S. ultimately went ahead with the project, and conducted its first hydrogen bomb test, on November 1, 1952. Oppenheimer's security credentials were eventually revoked. By the 1950s, there were concerns that the Soviets had stolen U.S. nuclear secrets, and that didn't bode well for Oppenheimer. He had befriended a number of avowed communists over the years, though historians aren't sure if he ever joined their party. And then, there was the hydrogen bomb issue. Some of Oppenheimer's political enemies thought his opposition to the H-bomb was unpatriotic at best. On December 21, 1953, Oppenheimer received a letter from the chair of the Atomic Energy Commission, telling him that he'd been labeled a security risk. Came under pressure to resign from the GAC, Oppenheimer pushed for a hearing instead, and he got one. Although, the panel that decided his fate conceded that he'd been a loyal citizen, they voted to revoke Oppenheimer's security clearance. Oppenheimer was nominated for a Nobel Prize 3 times. 18 people who worked with Oppenheimer at Los Alamos were able to put Nobel Prize winner on their lifetime resumes. But though Oppenheimer himself received 3 nominations for the Nobel Prize in Physics, he never won it. However, in 1963, he did get the prestigious Enrico Fermi Award, in recognition of his especially meritorious contribution to the development, use, or control of atomic energy. His security clearance was finally restored, 50 years after his death. Before his death, in Princeton, on February 18, 1967, public opinion had shifted back in Oppenheimer's favor. Scientists and activists spent decades pushing the government to clear his name, and their efforts finally paid off, albeit not until 2022. On December 16 of that year, the U.S. Department of Energy formally reversed the 1954 ruling that had stripped Oppenheimer of his security clearance. As time has passed, more evidence has come to light of the bias and unfairness of the process that Dr. Oppenheimer was subjected to, while the evidence of his loyalty and love of country have only been further affirmed, Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm said. Please like, share and subscribe. visualgk.com